The air crackled with something rare and electric that day in London. A moment so raw, so unfiltered, it felt like the city itself paused to listen. An ordinary British man, not a politician, not a pundit, not a polished talking head, stepped up to a microphone and spoke a truth so sharp it could cut through the fog of Fleet Street's endless spin. No theatrics, no shouting, just the kind of clarity that makes your skin prickle and your mind snap to attention. He didn't come to throw punches or chase clout. He came to say what millions have been thinking but too few have dared to voice. Prince Harry, a man born into the gilded cage of royalty, a man who served his country in war zones, a man hounded by cameras and death threats alike, deserves security. Not as a favor, not as a privilege, but as a fundamental right. And the fact that he's been denied it. That's not just a policy failure, it's a deliberate act of vengeance, a calculated move by a system that thrives on control and punishes those who dare to break free. This wasn't just a rant, it was a flare shot into the dark, exposing the ugly machinery of an institution that would rather see a man broken than admit its own flaws. And as his words echoed across radio waves and social media, they ignited something. A spark of defiance, a call for justice, a reminder that truth, when spoken plainly, can shake even the oldest foundations. Let's rewind for a moment and set the stage. Britain in 2025 is a nation still reeling from its own contradictions. Post-Brexit, post-pandemic, post-everything. It's a country where the headlines scream louder than the facts, where the royal family remains both a tourist attraction and a lightning rod for division. The monarchy, that ancient institution draped in velvet and protocol, is supposed to symbolize stability, continuity, duty. But beneath the crown jewels and the carefully curated photo ops, there's a rot that's been festering for years. A system that demands loyalty but offers none in return, that preaches tradition while wielding power with ruthless precision. And no one has exposed this more than Prince Harry. He didn't just leave the royal family in 2020, he shattered the illusion that the monarchy is infallible. He walked away from a life of scripted appearances and silent suffering, choosing instead to build something new, something honest. But honesty, it turns out, is the one thing the institution cannot forgive. This ordinary man's words cut through the noise because they named the absurdity at the heart of Harry's situation. Consider this. Every former Prime Minister, from Tony Blair to Boris Johnson to Liz Truss, whose tenure was so brief it barely registered, receives lifelong taxpayer-funded security. No questions asked, no public debates, no tabloid campaigns questioning their worth. These are people who made decisions that cost billions, who left office under clouds of controversy, who shaped the nation for better or worse. Yet their safety is guaranteed, their lives shielded by armed guards and armored cars. And then there's Harry, a man who never chose the spotlight but was born into it, who served 2 tours in Afghanistan, who was publicly named a target by the Taliban, who has been stalked by paparazzi and threatened by extremists. Delete. And yet when it comes to their safety, the answer from the Home Office, from the palace, from the establishment is a resounding no. Why? Because Harry dared to step away, because he married a woman who refused to bow to a system that demanded her silence, because together they exposed the cracks in a facade that's been polished for centuries. Let's talk about that facade for a moment. The royal family is often sold as a fairy tale, a living symbol of Britain's history and values. But fairy tales have villains, and this one's villain isn't Harry, it's the machinery that surrounds them. The palace, with its courtiers and its whispered deals, operates like a corporation protecting its brand. The British press, fueled by ad revenue and a hunger for scandal, is its willing accomplice. Together, they've crafted a narrative that paints Harry as a traitor, and their decision to leave as an act of betrayal. But what did they betray, exactly? A family that stood by while she was torn apart by racist headlines. A system that leaked stories to the press to deflect from its own scandals. A media that turned their every move, every dress, every glance, every jar of jam, into a weapon? The truth is, Harry and his wife didn't betray the monarchy. They exposed it. They showed the world that the institution isn't just flawed, It's punitive. It doesn't just demand loyalty, it demands submission. And when you refuse to submit, it doesn't just let you go, it tries to destroy you. The man who spoke out didn't stop at pointing out the hypocrisy of denying Harry security. He went further, calling it what it is: a punishment. Not a bureaucratic oversight, not a budget cut, but a deliberate message from the establishment to a man who dared to choose his own path. "You left us," the message says, "so we'll make sure you never feel safe again." Think about that for a second. Harry offered to pay for his own security, hundreds of thousands of pounds out of his own pocket. He didn't ask for a handout. He didn't demand special treatment. He simply asked for the same protection afforded to others in his position, people far less exposed, far less targeted. And the answer was no. The Home Office, the palace, the shadowy figures who pull the strings, they didn't just deny him, they humiliated him. They forced him into court battles, into public pleas, into a life where every trip, every public appearance, carries the weight of uncertainty. Meanwhile, the same system ensures that disgraced politicians and minor royals move through the world untouched, their security unquestioned, their privilege intact. This isn't just about Harry, though. It's about what their treatment reveals about power in Britain, about who gets protected and who gets abandoned. The establishment doesn't just protect its own, it protects those who play by its rules. Stay silent, toe the line, and you'll be shielded. Speak out, challenge the status quo, and you're on your own. This is why the ordinary man's words hit so hard, because they echoed a truth that resonates far beyond the royal family. They spoke to anyone who's ever felt crushed by a system that demands conformity, that punishes difference, that rewards compliance over courage. And they gave voice to a growing unease in Britain, a sense that the institutions meant to serve the public, government, media, monarchy, are instead serving themselves, protecting their own interests while leaving the vulnerable to fend for themselves. There's a broader context here too, one that stretches beyond the palace walls. Britain in 2025 is a nation grappling with its identity, caught between nostalgia for a fading empire and the messy realities of a modern, multicultural society. The media plays a dangerous game, stoking division to sell papers, clicks, and outrage. The royal family, once a unifying symbol, has become a battleground for culture wars, pitted against itself, with Harry cast as the villain in a drama he didn't write. But the script is unraveling. People like this ordinary man, like James O'Brien, who's been dismantling these narratives for years on LBC, are pulling at the threads. O'Brien, with his sharp wit and sharper logic, has long argued that Harry's decision to leave wasn't about abandoning duty. It was about survival. "I wouldn't have stayed either," he said once, and those words landed like a thunderclap, because they cut through the lies, the spin, the carefully constructed stories that paint Harry as a deserter and as a schemer. They remind us that no one owes their sanity, their safety, or their soul to an institution that refuses to protect them. What makes this moment, this man's speech, this spark of truth so powerful is that it's not just about one couple. It's about a reckoning. The royal family, the government, the media, they've all been complicit in a system that thrives on control, that fears transparency, that punishes those who dare to live freely. Harry and Meghan's story is a case study in what happens when you refuse to play along. They didn't just walk away from the monarchy, they walked away from a life of being managed, manipulated, and silenced. They chose to speak their truth, to build a life on their own terms, to raise their children away from the toxic glare of tabloids and courtiers. And for that, they've been hounded, vilified, and stripped of the basic protections most public figures take for granted. But here's the thing. They haven't broken, they've kept their voices, their grace, their resilience. And every time someone like this ordinary man speaks out, every time someone like James O'Brien calls out the hypocrisy, the facade cracks a little more. This isn't just a British